The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, each flicker slicing through my panic as I gripped my son's clammy hand. Ethan, my 8-year-old, lay pale and wheezing, his small chest heaving against the oxygen mask. I'd seen him like this before, but never this bad. Never with his eyes rolling back, his lips tinged blue, his tiny body betraying him because of her. It started with a phone call that morning. My sister, Rachel, had offered to watch Ethan while I ran errands. She'd been pushy about it lately, insisting she needed bonding time with her nephew. I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. Rachel was family, the one who'd held my hand through Mom's funeral, the one who'd braided my hair when we were kids. How could I have known she'd risk my son's life to prove a point? Kids these days are too soft, she'd said last week over coffee, her tone sharp with that self-righteous edge she'd developed since moving back to town. All these allergies, peanuts, gluten, air practically. Back in our day, we ate dirt and survived. I'd laughed it off, assuming it was just Rachel being Rachel, opinionated, brash, but harmless. Ethan's peanut allergy wasn't a theory to be debated. It was a fact, etched into every doctor's visit, every label I scanned, every EpiPen I carried. I'd told her 100 times. No peanuts, no traces, no risks. She'd nodded, but her eyes had that glint, like she thought I was overreacting. When I dropped Ethan off at her house that morning, he'd been his usual self, all gap-toothed smiles, clutching his Spider-Man backpack, chattering about his new comic book. Rachel had ruffled his hair, promising pizza and a movie. "Don't worry, Claire," she'd said, waving me off. "I've got this." I should have seen the warning signs, her overly casual tone, the way she avoided my gaze. But I was tired, juggling work and single motherhood, and I wanted to believe she'd respect my rules. For hours later, my phone rang. Rachel's voice was shrill, unrecognizable. "Claire, you need to get to the hospital. Ethan, he's having trouble breathing." My heart plummeted. I don't remember the drive, only the blur of traffic lights and the scream of my own pulse. When I burst into the ER, Ethan was already hooked to monitors, his small body trembling as doctors swarmed. Rachel stood in the corner, her face pale but defiant, arms crossed like she was bracing for a fight. "What happened?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The doctor, a kind-eyed woman with gray streaks in her hair, explained, "Anaphylaxis, triggered by peanut exposure." My world tilted. Ethan's allergy was severe, one bite could kill him. I drilled that into Rachel. I turned to her, my hands shaking. "What did you do?" She hesitated, her lips parting, then closing. "I gave him a cookie," she said finally, her voice low. "It had peanut butter. I thought, just a little wouldn't hurt. I thought it might help him toughen up." Toughen up. The words exploded from me, raw and jagged. "You fed my son something that could kill him to toughen him up?" The room spun. Nurses glanced over, their faces a mix of pity and discomfort. Rachel's eyes darted away, but not before I saw the guilt flicker across her face. She didn't apologize. She just stood there, as if her intentions justified the monitors beeping around my son. The doctor pulled me aside, her voice gentle but firm. "We've stabilized him, but he's not out of danger yet. He'll need to stay overnight." I nodded, numb, my eyes locked on Ethan. His breathing was steadier now, but his face was still so pale, his lashes dark against his cheeks. I wanted to scream, to shake Rachel until she understood the weight of what she'd done. But I couldn't leave his side. Not now, not ever again. As the hours dragged on, I sat by Ethan's bed, stroking his hair, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Rachel lingered in the hallway, pacing, occasionally peeking through the glass door. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her excuses. But then the nurse handed me the preliminary hospital bill, a staggering $12,000, climbing with every test and treatment. Insurance would cover some, but not all. I stared at the numbers, my anger boiling over. Rachel wasn't just reckless. She was costing us more than I could fathom. When I finally confronted her, she was sitting in the waiting room, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. "You're paying for this," I said, shoving the bill under her nose. Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Claire," she said, her voice small. "I thought I was helping." Helping. I spat. You almost killed him. The words hung between us, heavy and irreversible. For the first time, I saw something crack in her expression, not just guilt, but something deeper, something she wasn't saying. I didn't know it then, but that hospital bill would unravel everything. Her motives, her secrets, and the rift between us that might never heal. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear, a sterile cocktail that clung to my skin as I watched Ethan sleep. His chest rose and fell under the thin blanket, each breath a small victory against the nightmare Rachel had unleashed. I couldn't stop replaying her words, "Toughen him up." They echoed like a taunt, each syllable a fresh cut. I'd sent Rachel home after our confrontation in the waiting room. Her presence felt like a weight I couldn't bear, not while Ethan was still hooked to and for, his small hand limp in mine. But her absence didn't bring peace. My mind churned with questions. Why would she do this? What made her think she could play God with my son's life? Rachel had always been stubborn, but this wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It felt deliberate, almost cruel. By morning, Ethan's color was better, his eyes fluttering open with that sleepy trust that broke my heart. "Mom, am I okay?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. I forced a smile, brushing his hair back. "You're gonna be fine, buddy. Just rest." But I wasn't fine. The hospital bill sat on the bedside table, a paper anchor dragging me into reality. The costs were climbing, medications, observation, tests, and I was already drowning in debt from the divorce. Rachel's recklessness wasn't just a betrayal, it was a financial sledgehammer. I called my best friend, Lila, to vent. She'd always been my rock, the one who'd seen me through the worst of my marriage's collapse. She did what? Lila's voice crackled through the phone, her outrage mirroring mine. "Claire, that's not just stupid, it's dangerous." What was she thinking? I didn't have an answer, only a gnawing sense that there was more to Rachel's actions than she'd let on. When Rachel showed up at the hospital later that day, uninvited, I was ready to explode. She stood in the doorway, holding a cheap bouquet of carnations, her face a mask of forced remorse. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice low. I wanted to say no, to banish her for good, but Ethan was awake now, coloring in a hospital-provided activity book. I didn't want him to see us fight. We stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on her face. "I'm sorry, Claire," she began, but her tone lacked the weight of true regret. "I didn't think it would be this bad. I read online that small exposures can help build tolerance. I thought I was doing something good for him." I stared at her, incredulous. "You read online? You're not a doctor, Rachel. You don't get to experiment on my kid." My voice rose, drawing glances from passing nurses. She flinched, but didn't back down. "You're so overprotective," she said, her eyes narrowing. "You're raising him to be weak, always coddling him." I was trying to help him be stronger. The words hit like a slap. Weak? My son, who'd endured countless doctor visits, who carried an EpiPen with the bravery of a soldier, was weak? I stepped closer, my voice low and trembling. "You don't get to decide what's best for him. You're not his mother. You're barely his aunt." Her face hardened, and for a moment, I saw something unfamiliar in her eyes. Resentment, maybe, or something darker. "You've always thought you're better than me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Perfect Claire, with her perfect kid, her perfect life. "You don't know what it's like to have nothing." I froze. Nothing? Rachel had a decent job, a nice apartment, a life that seemed stable, if not glamorous. But before I could press her, a nurse interrupted, asking me to sign more paperwork. Rachel slipped away, leaving her carnations on a chair. I didn't touch them. That night, as Ethan slept, I opened my laptop and started digging. Rachel's words, "You don't know what it's like to have nothing," stuck with me. She'd been cagey about her life since moving back to town, always deflecting when I asked about her job or her plans. I checked her social media, expecting the usual selfies and vague inspirational quotes, but her accounts were sparse, almost abandoned. A quick search of her name turned up nothing unusual, but then I remembered the hospital bill. The itemized charges were a maze of medical jargon, but one line caught my eye. A secondary insurance claim, partially processed, with Rachel's name listed as a guarantor. Why would she be involved? I hadn't asked her to cover anything yet. She'd only seen the bill for a moment. My stomach twisted. Something was off, and I was determined to find out what. The hospital's hum faded into background noise as I stared at the bill, Rachel's name glaring back at me. Guarantor? She hadn't offered to pay, and I hadn't asked. My fingers hovered over my phone, itching to call her, but Ethan stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about Spider-Man. I set the bill aside. Whatever Rachel was hiding, it could wait until my son was safe. By the next morning, Ethan was stable enough to be discharged. The doctor warned me to monitor him closely. His system was still fragile, and another exposure could be catastrophic. I nodded, my throat tight, as I packed his things. Rachel hadn't returned since our hallway argument, and I was grateful. I needed space to process, to plan, to protect Ethan from whatever madness had possessed her. At home, Ethan curled up on the couch with his favorite blanket, his energy drained, but his spirit intact. "Can we watch a movie, Mom?" he asked, his voice small. I kissed his forehead, promising popcorn and superheroes, but my mind was elsewhere. The hospital bill, now tucked in my purse, felt like a ticking bomb. I needed answers. I called Lila again, this time asking her to watch Ethan for an hour. "I need to deal with Rachel," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Lila didn't hesitate. "Go get her, Claire. She doesn't get to walk away from this." With Ethan safe, I drove to Rachel's apartment, the bill crumpled in my hand. Her building was a step down from what I'd expected, a faded brick complex with peeling paint and a flickering entry light. I knocked, my heart pounding. When she opened the door, she looked disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. "Claire," she said, startled. "What are you doing here?" I held up the bill. "Why is your name on this as a guarantor?" Her face paled, and she stepped back, letting me in without a word. The apartment was a mess, takeout containers on the counter, clothes strewn across the couch. This wasn't the Rachel I knew, the one who'd always kept her space pristine. "I was trying to help," she said, sinking onto the couch. "I called the hospital after you showed me the bill. I told them I'd cover whatever insurance didn't. I didn't want you to stress about money on top of everything." Her words sounded reasonable, but they didn't add up. "You don't have that kind of money," I said, my voice sharp. "You just moved back. You're barely settled. Why would you volunteer for a $12,000 bill?" She looked away, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. That's when I noticed it. A stack of unopened envelopes on the coffee table, some marked "Final Notice." "Rachel, what's going on?" I pressed. "What aren't you telling me?" She shook her head, her lips tight, but I wasn't leaving without answers. I grabbed one of the envelopes, her name, a utility company, a red stamp screaming "past due." "You're in debt," I said, piecing it together. "You can't even pay your own bills. Why would you take on mine?" She stood abruptly, her face flushing. "Because I owe you," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I messed up, okay? I almost killed Ethan, and I can't live with that. I thought if I could fix this, make it right somehow," she trailed off, tears spilling down her cheeks. I wanted to believe her, to see the sister I'd once adored, but her words felt hollow. "This isn't about fixing things," I said. "You fed him peanuts because you thought you knew better. You put his life at risk to prove a point, and now you're playing martyr with money you don't have." She flinched, but the defiance was back, simmering beneath her tears. "You don't understand," she said. "You've never had to struggle like I have. You got the house, the kid, the perfect little life. I came back here with nothing, Claire. Nothing." Her words stung, but they also lit a spark. Rachel wasn't just reckless, she was desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. I left her apartment with more questions than answers, the hospital bill still in my hand, its numbers now a map to something bigger. Whatever Rachel was hiding, it was tied to that bill, and I was going to find out what. Back home, Ethan's laughter filled the living room as he watched his movie, oblivious to the chaos swirling around him. I sat at the kitchen table, the hospital bill spread out like a crime scene. Rachel's name as guarantor wasn't just a gesture, it was a clue. Her outburst about owing me, her cryptic comments about having nothing, pointed to a deeper truth. I needed to know what she was hiding, not just for Ethan's sake, but for mine. I started with the envelopes I'd seen at her apartment. The memory of those final notice stamps gnawed at me. Rachel had always been proud, never asking for help, even when we were kids. If she was drowning in debt, why hadn't she told me? And why risk Ethan's life with such a reckless act? I opened my laptop and dug deeper, starting with a reverse phone number search on Rachel's contact. Nothing unusual. Then I tried her name with keywords: debt, bankruptcy, anything that might explain her desperation. A hit came up, a local news article from 6 months ago, buried in a small-town paper where Rachel had lived before moving back. It mentioned a failed business venture, a cafe she'd poured her savings into, only to lose it to unpaid loans and a shady partner. The article painted her as a cautionary tale, a woman who'd bet everything and lost. No wonder she'd come back to town so quiet, so guarded. But it didn't explain the peanuts or the hospital bill. I called the hospital's billing department, my hands shaking as I punched in the numbers. The clerk was polite but firm. Rachel had called the day of Ethan's admission, offering to cover the costs as a secondary guarantor. She provided an insurance policy number. The clerk said, "It's under review, but it's not standard. Looks like a supplemental plan, maybe from an employer." Employer? Rachel had told me she was freelancing, picking up odd jobs since moving back. Another lie. I pressed the clerk for details, but she couldn't share more without Rachel's consent. Frustrated, I hung up and texted Lila, asking her to keep Ethan a bit longer. I needed to confront Rachel again, but this time, I'd be prepared. I drove back to her apartment, my mind racing. When she opened the door, she looked worse than before, hair tangled, eyes sunken. "You again," she said, her voice flat. "What now?" "I know about the cafe," I said, stepping inside without invitation. "I know you lost everything. Why didn't you tell me?" Her face crumpled, but she didn't deny it. "And the hospital bill. Why are you listed as a guarantor? What's this insurance policy you gave them?" She sank onto the couch, her hands covering her face. "I didn't want you to know," she mumbled. "I thought I could handle it. The cafe, it destroyed me, Claire. I borrowed money I couldn't repay, and when it failed, I had to take a job I hate just to stay afloat. The insurance is from them. It's all I've got." "What job?" I pressed. She hesitated, then named a company I recognized, a shady telemarketing firm known for exploiting workers. "They don't even pay me enough to cover my rent," she admitted. "But I thought if I could help with Ethan's bill, it'd make up for what I did." Her words sounded sincere, but they didn't erase the image of Ethan gasping for air. "You don't get to make up for almost killing my son," I said, my voice cold. "And you don't get to lie to me anymore. What else are you hiding?" She looked up, her eyes wide with something like fear. "Nothing," she said too quickly. I swear. But I didn't believe her. The hospital bill, the insurance, her desperation, it all pointed to something bigger, something she was still keeping from me. I left her apartment with a sinking feeling that the truth was worse than I'd imagined. Ethan's recovery was slow but steady, his smile returning as he played with his action figures. But I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me like damp clothes. Rachel's half-truths and the hospital bill's mysteries were puzzle pieces that didn't fit, and I was determined to force them together. I couldn't let her recklessness, or whatever she was hiding, endanger Ethan again. I started with the insurance policy she'd mentioned. Using the policy number from the hospital bill, I called the provider, posing as Rachel to get answers. The agent confirmed it was a supplemental plan, tied to her employer, but something was off. The coverage was minimal, barely enough to dent a bill like Ethan's. "It's a group plan for contract workers," the agent said. "Not exactly robust. Why would Rachel offer it as a lifeline when it was so inadequate?" I dug deeper, searching the company she worked for. Online reviews painted a grim picture: low wages, high pressure, questionable practices. One former employee claimed the company pushed workers to sell dubious health products, including allergy desensitization kits. My heart stopped. Was that where Rachel got the idea to toughen up Ethan? Had she bought into some scam about curing allergies through exposure? I confronted her again, this time at a coffee shop to keep things civil. She looked exhausted, her hands trembling around her latte. "Did you get the peanut idea from your job?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "Are you selling some quack allergy cure?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't deny it. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice shaking. They showed us studies. Small exposures can reduce sensitivity. I thought I could help Ethan. Save you from all those doctor bills. Save me. I leaned forward, my anger barely contained. You almost killed him, Rachel. And now you're tangled up with a company that's probably scamming people. Did you use Ethan to test their garbage? No, she cried, loud enough to turn heads. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I wanted to fix things. For him, for you, for me. She broke down, sobbing into her hands, but I felt no pity. Her desperation had crossed a line, and Ethan had paid the price. I left the coffee shop with a new resolve. I called a lawyer friend, Sarah, who specialized in consumer fraud. Can you look into this company? I asked, forwarding her the details. I think Rachel's involved in something shady, and it's tied to what happened to Ethan. Sarah promised to dig, warning me it could take time. If they're selling fake allergy cures, it's bigger than just your sister, she said. You might be opening a can of worms. That night, I tucked Ethan into bed, his small hand gripping mine. Mom, is Aunt Rachel mad at me? He asked, his eyes wide. I forced a smile, my heart breaking. No, buddy. She's just mixed up. But you're safe now. As he drifted off, I vowed to protect him, no matter what it took. Rachel's secrets were unraveling, and I was ready to pull the final thread. The days blurred as Ethan healed, his laughter a fragile reminder of what I'd almost lost. But the hospital bill and Rachel's lies loomed like storm clouds. Sarah's investigation into Rachel's employer was moving slowly, but she'd confirmed my suspicions. The company was under scrutiny for selling and proven health products, including allergy kits that promised natural desensitization. The thought that Rachel had used Ethan as a guinea pig for their junk science made my blood boil. I avoided Rachel, ignoring her texts and calls. But one evening, she showed up at my door, her face gaunt, her eyes pleading. Claire, please, she said, her voice cracking. I need to explain. Against my better judgment, I let her in, but I kept my distance, arms crossed. She sat on the couch, wringing her hands. The company, they made it sound so promising, she said. They said small exposures could cure allergies, save kids from living in fear. I believed them. I thought I was helping Ethan, helping you. Her voice broke, but I stayed silent, waiting. When it went wrong, I panicked. I offered to cover the bill because I felt so guilty. But I'm broke, Claire. I can't pay it. Her confession confirmed what I'd feared, but it wasn't enough. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Why lie about everything? Your job, your money, your life? She looked down, tears dripping onto her lap. I was ashamed, she whispered. After the cafe failed, I had nothing. I didn't want you to see me like that. Her shame didn't excuse her actions, but it cracked open a window to her motives. She wasn't just reckless, she was broken, chasing redemption in all the wrong ways. You need to make this right, I said. Not just for me, but for Ethan. And you need to come clean about everything. She nodded, promising to cooperate with Sarah's investigation. But as she left, I felt no relief. The hospital bill was still unpaid, and the company's shadow loomed large. Sarah called the next day with news. The company was facing a class action lawsuit, and Rachel's testimony could be key. If she's willing to talk, we can nail them, Sarah said. But it'll mean exposing her role in what happened to Ethan. I didn't hesitate. Do it, I said. She made her choices. But as I hung up, a pang of guilt hit me. Rachel was my sister, the girl who'd once shared my secrets, my dreams. Could I destroy her to save Ethan? The answer was clear, but it didn't make it easier. The lawsuit against Rachel's employer moved faster than I expected. Sarah's team uncovered a trail of victims, parents duped into buying allergy kits, kids hospitalized, lives upended. Rachel's testimony was damning. She admitted to being trained to push the kits, to believing their lies about curing allergies. She'd fed Ethan the peanut-laced cookie as a test, desperate to prove the company's claims and ease her own guilt over her failures. In court, Rachel broke down, her voice trembling as she recounted the day in the hospital. I thought I was helping my nephew, she said, tears streaming. I was wrong, and I'll never forgive myself. The jury's faces softened, but mine didn't. Ethan's life wasn't an experiment, and her regret couldn't undo the terror of that day. The company settled, paying out millions, including enough to cover Ethan's hospital bill and more. Rachel faced no charges, but her reputation was shattered. She moved away, unable to face the town or me. I didn't stop her. The sister I'd known was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't trust. Ethan, now thriving, asked about her sometimes. I told him she was figuring things out, shielding him from the truth. One day I'd explain, but not yet. For now, I focused on him, his laughter, his resilience, his life. The hospital bill, once a symbol of betrayal, became a reminder of what mattered, protecting my son, no matter the cost. As I tucked Ethan into bed one night, he hugged me tight. "You're the best, Mom," he said. I smiled, my heart full. Rachel's mistakes had nearly destroyed us, but they'd also shown me my own strength. We were survivors, Ethan and I, and no bill, no betrayal, could take that away.